I'm going to tell you now the most painful part of this whole watching this. And hey, as a law enforcement, listen, between us, Mark, 60 years plus of law enforcement life, parts of this thing made me really uncomfortable with how it was handled, right? Really uncomfortable. And this was what I'm going to discuss now is probably what I think is the biggest blunder. And again, interested to see if you picked up on this. When the police were interviewing him in Vallejo, they put his phone on airplane mode, right?
Yes.
So what had happened during that time, which he didn't know because there was no missed calls, right? Because the phone was in airplane mode. It's not like the phone rang and was not answered. The kidnapper called his phone twice. And because it was in airplane mode, the police took it from him, put it in airplane mode. Because that happened, that bit of evidence was missed. Now, if he was allowed to have the phone there, if he was allowed to answer the phone, if he said, hey, I don't know who this is, let me answer this. Within minutes, they could have identified the location where he was calling from, and the second rape of Denise Huskins would have been prevented.
It is painful.
A very basic tool. And hey, I know from my law enforcement life, one thing we focus on a lot is telephones and exploitation of cell phones. Oh my goodness. That's the one thing that really made me just really disappointed in how this is handled. When you realize that a very basic, in a kidnapping case, you're going to cut off a means of communication that the kidnapper might use to contact someone. Like, that just makes no sense.
Right.
That just makes no sense whatsoever.
It's an excellent point. I'd forgotten about that, but it's an excellent point. In other words, you have a tool right there. Let the phone ring. Let it go. And by the way, you said, hey, who's calling you? In other words, this is just like investigation 101.
So that was a huge miss on their part. I mean, the next thing is the kidnapper tells her it's time to go home, right? Tells her it's time to go home and puts the goggles on her. Or actually, he might have actually taped her eyes shut. I think he taped her eyes shut and then put sunglasses on her, drugged her again, put her out in the car, and drove her down to Huntington Beach and dropped her off.
By the way, for those of you who are not familiar, of course, you can Google it right now, but from South Lake Tahoe to Huntington Beach on a good day with like no traffic, it's probably a good 9-hour drive. And I thought about that every time. I assume, I don't have any reason to believe that she wasn't in the trunk the entire time. Just that aspect of this torture by itself is mind-boggling to me. That's just an ancillary note.
He drops her off in Huntington Beach, and then that's where her side of the story kind of unites with his side of the story. They both obviously having experienced different parts of it. After the police in Vallejo hold a press conference saying that they plundered resources and that it's a hoax, then they interview her the next day. And I just felt like that was super ironic. They're interviewing her the day after they held a press conference saying that she lied. And she told, from what I saw, Mark, she told exactly, I don't believe she had even spoken with Aaron yet, if I'm correct about that.
Not that I'm aware of.
And I think she told almost the exact same story about the abduction that he did.
Yep.
So when you saw the FBI then get involved in this, Mark, what did you think?
Well, I mean, disappointed is the kind word that I can use. Look, we can go back to the initial involvement of the FBI in regards to the polygraph. But then we have a couple more FBI agents too. I think 2 additional ones, if I remember correctly, that are involved and are interviewing Aaron now, if I remember correctly. But one of whom, you talk about, like you said, the story getting stranger and stranger, had a previous involvement. Now, if you guys remember at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about a woman named Andrea. Andrea and Denise is the woman who was kidnapped, who was with Aaron when she was kidnapped. Denise and Andrea were co-workers at a hospital. Not only in the same hospital, but in the same unit.